So, I've been thinking about a concept in Spanish. It's called autogolpe, which means literally self-coup. It's when the legitimately elected leadership of a country carries out essentially a coup d'etat against itself so as to hold on to power permanently. Okay? It overthrows the legitimate mechanisms of changing power, and it eliminates them so that it can stay in perpetual power. And I think it's something that you guys in the United States in particular should be thinking about, because if you get right down to it, see, the wokesters are going to carry out an autogolpe. I do not believe that there will be an election in 2024. Or, let me rephrase that. I would give the odds of only 1 in 3 that there is a legitimate election in 2024. Because, you see, it's very clear that the cosmopolitan leadership class in the West, they are completely panicking. They're completely freaking out. I mean, you see this thing that happened in Germany, right? Where it seems to me from the outside that a bunch of old yahoos, I mean, guys a lot older than me, and therefore guys who should have known better, we're going to stage like some sort of weird coup in Germany, of all places, man. And none of these guys had any kind of institutional authority at the time. Okay, some of them were like former army officers and police guys and what have you, but at this time they had no legitimate authority whatsoever. They were going to like wander into the Reichstag and overthrow the government of Germany. I mean, come on, what drug are you smoking? Or more likely, and what I think, there must have been several agents provocateurs in those groups. Several guys who egged them on, okay? As so much of the alphabet agencies in the West tend to do nowadays, right? Because they can't find any insurgents, so they have to create them and foment them and egg them on, right? Like January 6th. I mean, you saw the video of January 6th, right? With Ray Epps egging people on to go into the Capitol. And when they went into the Capitol, they were all so nice and polite, walking between the cordon-off velvet ropes, I mean, come on, right? See, the Western leadership class, they're panicking because they know that they're so mismanaging the entire situation. And they know that the bill will come due. And so they don't know what to do. They're freaking out. And they're seeing, armed insurgencies everywhere they turn, and every time they look at the shadow, they jump, right? And so they're going to do something, some sort of false flag, some sort of excuse to suspend elections in the U.S. And I know that sounds absurd. And if I'd said something like that a year ago, I would say, if I'd heard something like that, I'd said, that guy's on drugs, okay? I'm not on drugs. Because all the dealers left Kharkov. God damn it. Did I say that out loud? Anyway, no, I'm not on drugs, okay? And I legitimately believe this. I legitimately think so. You got to understand that the election of 2020, that was a color revolution. For those of you who don't know, I suggest you look it up, because color revolutions are basically where you have what seem to be spontaneous demonstrations, but are actually fomented or even instigated by NGOs and people allied with this cosmopolitan leadership class, the National Endowment for Democracy, Open Society and all that bullshit, right? World Economic Forum and all those assholes, right? And so what they do is that they stage these insurgencies in countries that overthrow the legitimate government. And what were BLM, if not, riots over this, what's his name? The junkie who had a heart attack. What's his face? Floyd, whatever, right? And that was a typical classic color revolution to overthrow Trump. And even though they crooked the election, because they did, those elections, that election outcome in 2020 and the one in 2022, no, that was just hinky as all get out. I mean, if this were like any other country, the United States State Department would be protesting the undemocratic elections that were held. I mean, because it was absurd with the mail-in ballots and ballot bundling and ballot box stuffing. I mean, come on, man. So the 2020 election, that was a color revolution. That's what it looked like. You know, all this kind of civil disturbance and all that to undermine the current authority so that some other guy can sweep in. In this case, it was Joe Biden. I mean, that was a color revolution. And like I said, the 2022 elections, they were crooked. I mean, come on. And so the cosmopolitan establishment, which, you know, pretends to be liberal, but they're not really liberal. They don't care about left-wing or right-wing. They just care about holding on to power and doing whatever they want and milking at the tit of the American government. I mean, that's what they're really about, okay? So anyway, these people, they feel that their control is slipping, that a lot of their policies are just blowing up in their face. I mean, look at the sanctions in Russia, for crying out loud. You know, Russia just skated away scot-free, and Europe and the United States is suffering, right? They're talking about declaring Russia a state sponsor of terrorism. Oh, man. You know why they don't do it? Because, see, if they declared Russia a state sponsor of terrorism, all of a sudden a host of automatic mechanisms would come into play, essentially isolating Russia. And there are too many countries over the past 10 months that have become incredibly close to Russia. And it would oblige these nations to cut off all trade with Russia, and they no longer can. China and India, most particularly, would have to cut off in order to stay in good with the Americans. And so between the Russians, who are right there and have all these resources, energy resources and so forth, and the Americans, which is just a bankrupt state, they're going to choose the Russians. That's why the Americans don't really dare call Russia a state sponsor of terrorism, even though they want to, because they figure that this will finally crush the Russian economy, which it won't, okay? Even if they were to successfully implement such a thing, Russia is, for all intents and purposes, self-sufficient. It doesn't need the rest of the world. As a practical matter, they can get by. They've got food and they've got energy. And that's pretty much all you need, okay? And so, yeah, their standard of living would fall quite drastically if they were truly isolated by the entire world, i.e. assuming that this declaring Russia a state sponsor of terrorism actually worked and isolated Russia completely, the way Iran or Cuba are, right? But that won't happen with Russia because Russia is self-sufficient and, much more importantly at this point, these other nations would never cut trade with Russia because they depend on Russia. Japan wouldn't go for it. Even though Japan is an occupied country, occupied by the United States, they could not cut off trade with Russia because they'd collapse as an economy, right? So anyway, this neoliberal, warmongering, cosmopolitan leadership class, they're seeing how things are decaying in the United States. Now, forget about Western Europe for a moment and just focus on the United States for now. I've been following a lot of people who are on the ground in the United States, a lot of people that I talk to, a lot of just a wide gamut of people in the U.S. And the state of the country is collapsing very rapidly. And what's shocking is the food situation. That's something that really is telling, because the United States traditionally has been self-sufficient insofar as food is concerned. But of course, the issue becomes, if the price to get those food products to the market it's just not possible, it's just not economically viable, then that food is not going to get to the supermarket, so people are going to go hungry. And that's a fact. 2023 is going to be a catastrophic year in the United States. I mean, forget about the markets and shit like that. The Federal Reserve Board and the Treasury Department are going to figure out a way to keep the markets more or less levitated by just any means necessary, right? But in terms of actually getting energy resources, i.e. heating and gasoline, and food products to the people, there are going to be food shortages. People are going to go hungry in the U.S. and not just, here and there in just some random place. No. Big swaths of it. Okay? 2023 is going to be a catastrophic year. And so I'm telling you, the Biden administration is going to try to get ahead of this because Biden himself is just a puppet. He's nobody. He's a senile old man, frankly. It's Ron Klain, his chief of staff. He's the real president. And Ron Klain and all the people around him, supporting him, people in the State Department, all the rest of it, they're going to figure out a way to somehow stage some event, some like real or apparently real kind of insurgency. And they're going to suspend the 2024 election. I mean, like I said, I give it 2 out of 3 chances that happens. And all the opposition in the world isn't going to help. Because all the media, all the social media, it's in the pockets of these people. They're going to be able to manipulate the narrative. And yeah, sure, a lot of people are waking up. A lot of people are getting red-pilled. I mean, hell, the term getting red-pilled has gone mainstream. I'm watching it in the news, people talking about it. People talking about getting red-pilled in the sense of, us dissidents on the fringes of social media have been saying for years, of like waking up to reality and realizing that the narrative is bullshit. And that the reality and the narrative, the gap between them is enormous. See, people are waking up, but it's not quite enough, or maybe it will be enough to actually have some sort of real insurgency. And if it's real, if it's bona fide, even more so, they'll crack down and they are going to suspend the election. They're going to do it. Yeah, and it's going to be like martial law in the United States. See, because you gotta step back and understand historically what is happening. The United States inherited the British Empire, for all intents and purposes, after 1945, certainly after 1956 and Suez. And so what has the United States been doing? It's been living beyond its means because its industrial power that it had after the end of the Second World War, when everybody else was decimated or poor as dirt, like in China, for instance. Well, they had that industrial capacity, and it made them rich. And they acquired resources, but they were also selling goods. But over the decades, the United States has deindustrialized. It's become a service economy. They call it the post-industrial economy, like it's a good thing. It's not. Okay? This war in Ukraine is proving that. You want to have industry. The Russians have industry. That's why they're winning this fucking war. Okay? But anyway, the United States has deindustrialized. The United States has been living off its credit card. The United States has printed up a whole boatload of money over the last, 24 months or so. Mm-hmm. And so what's going to happen is that this empire is collapsing. That's what's happening. And collapsing empires inevitably lash out. They lash out by getting into stupid, stupid wars that just drive the stake in further. Or they have internal problems that become insurmountable. And so the leadership class, and this is not just the United States, this is historical. Look at every empire, it's always the same. The leadership class becomes completely detached from the people, as they have, and they get afraid of the people and start to implement repressive measures. And these repressive measures, at first, but eventually the people get sick and tired of it, especially when there's no food. See, you can get away with a lot so long as you're feeding the people. Remember, bread and circus, that's what the people want. In circus, we got plenty of that, social media and all the rest of it. But the bread, see, when that happens, all bets are off. And so, you're going to see it. The Biden administration is going to pull some stunt. They're going to either create a false flag insurgency or perhaps a bona fide but underdeveloped, understrength insurgency will occur at some point. And the Biden administration is going to crush it and is going to use that as an excuse to lock down the whole country. Lock it down, suspend elections. And then what are Americans going to do? Because the people in the United States are so atomized, so disjointed and internally divided. I mean, I'm just throwing it out there. What will happen? I don't know. After this autogolpe, after this self-coup. But it's going to happen. we're actually starting to see it happen. Know what's going on.